What if I told you that one of the most lethal tank destroyers of World War II was built on a lie? That American engineers created a weapon so fast, so devastating, that German tank commanders who survived encounters with it reported feeling hunted rather than engaged in battle. The M18 Hellcat wasn't supposed to exist, at least not in the form it took. It violated every principle of armored warfare that military strategists had established. It was too light, too fast, too exposed. When German crews first encountered it in the hedgerows of France in 1944, many dismissed it as a desperate American improvisation, a tin can on tracks that would crumple under the first shot from a Panther or Tiger. They laughed at its open turret, mocked its thin armor, and predicted easy kills. Then the Hellcats started moving, and the laughter died in throats that would never draw another breath. This is the story of how American ingenuity turned weakness into the deadliest strength on the battlefield, and how a vehicle designed around a single radical principle, shoot first, never get shot, rewrote the rules of armored combat. This is the story of the tank destroyer that German veterans came to fear more than any other American vehicle, the machine that proved speed kills faster than armor protects. The M18 Hellcat entered service in July 1943, the brainchild of a doctrine that most military planners considered suicidal. While other nations built heavier, more heavily armored fighting vehicles, the United States Tank Destroyer Force had committed to a radical philosophy: mobility over protection, firepower over armor, aggression over defense. The Hellcat embodied this doctrine so completely that it became both the doctrine's greatest vindication and its most controversial expression. Weighing just under 18 tons, less than half the weight of a Sherman tank, and a fraction of the German vehicles it would face, the M18 mounted a powerful 76mm gun in an open-top turret that could traverse 360 degrees in 20 seconds, faster than any tank in the world. Its Wright Continental engine pushed this lightweight frame to speeds exceeding 55 miles per hour on roads, making it the fastest tracked armored vehicle of the entire war. But here's what made veterans wake up sweating decades later. That speed came at a price measured in fractions of an inch. The Hellcat's armor maxed out at 1 inch thick on the front hull, with sides and rear even thinner. A German 88mm shell could punch through it like a nail through cardboard. The moment that defined the M18's legend came not in a single battle, but in thousands of encounters across France, Belgium, and Germany, where this fundamental trade-off, speed for armor, was tested in the crucible of combat. American crews climbed into these vehicles, knowing that if a German gunner drew a bead on them, there would be no second chances, no lucky deflections off sloped armor, no time to bail out before the ammunition cooked off. They were racing death itself, and the only way to survive was to never stop moving, never present a stationary target, and kill the enemy before he could return fire. The Hellcat story begins not with tanks, but with a mistake that cost thousands of American lives. In the years before Pearl Harbor, Army doctrine had split the armored force into two distinct branches. Tanks would support infantry and exploit breakthroughs, while a separate tank destroyer force would counter enemy armor. This seemed logical on paper, but it created an organizational nightmare and a vehicle development path that initially produced disasters. The early tank destroyers, converted half-tracks and trucks mounting anti-tank guns, proved catastrophically vulnerable in combat. American soldiers died in vehicles that couldn't protect them, couldn't catch German armor, and couldn't survive long enough to use their weapons effectively. Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, chief architect of the tank destroyer doctrine, believed fanatically in a simple principle. The best defense against a tank was a faster, more agile vehicle that could outmaneuver it, strike from unexpected angles, and vanish before retaliation. But turning this theory into steel required engineers to abandon every instinct that had guided armored vehicle design since World War I. The Buick Motor Division, tasked with creating this revolutionary vehicle, faced a challenge that seemed impossible: build something that could outrun German armor, destroy it at range, and cost less than a standard tank while being simpler to produce and maintain. The engineers at Buick made choices that horrified traditional armor officers. They stripped away protective steel until the vehicle barely qualified as armored. They used an aircraft engine never intended for ground combat. They left the turret open to the sky, exposing the crew to artillery fragments, grenades, and even small arms fire. They designed a suspension system that prioritized speed over stability, creating a vehicle that could flip if driven carelessly. Every decision reflected a singular, uncompromising vision. This machine existed to kill, not to survive. Its crew's survival depended entirely on their ability to see first, shoot first, and disappear before the enemy could respond. The men assigned to these vehicles came from every corner of America. Farm boys from Iowa, who understood engines, street kids from Brooklyn who thought fast under pressure, college students whose studies had been interrupted by war. They trained at Camp Hood in Texas, where instructors drilled them relentlessly in the tactics that might keep them alive. Never attack from the front, never remain stationary after firing, never assume you've killed what you hit, never trust your armor to save you. These crews learned to think like hunters rather than soldiers, to embrace asymmetric warfare decades before that term entered military vocabulary. The Hellcat represented a philosophical revolution in how America approached armored warfare, a revolution that challenged not just German tactical thinking, but American assumptions about courage, protection, and the moral contract between commanders and soldiers. At its core, the M18 embodied the principle that had defined American warfare since the Revolution: use superior mobility and initiative to offset material disadvantages, fight smart rather than fair, and win by refusing to fight on the enemy's terms. This concept, speed as armor, sounds simple until you understand what it demanded from crews. German tankers in Panthers and Tigers fought from mobile fortresses, protected by steel thick enough to shrug off most Allied guns. They could afford mistakes, could take hits and keep fighting, could rely on their armor to give them second chances. Hellcat crews had no such luxury. Every engagement was a calculated gamble with death. They operated in a state of controlled terror, knowing that a single error in judgment, a moment's hesitation or bad luck could transform their vehicle into a crematorium before they could react. The open-top turret, perhaps the Hellcat's most controversial feature, embodied this philosophy perfectly. Critics called it a death trap, arguing that it exposed crews to artillery, mortars, and airbursts. Defenders countered that it provided superior situational awareness, allowed faster escape if the vehicle was hit, and eliminated the claustrophobic terror of being sealed in a steel coffin. The truth lay somewhere between. The open turret forced crews to remain alert, prevented them from developing the false sense of security that got tank crews killed, and reminded them every moment that their survival depended on aggression, awareness, and speed. But here's the deeper truth that military historians still debate. The Hellcat challenged fundamental assumptions about masculine courage and military honor that had defined warfare for centuries. Traditional military culture equated bravery with standing firm under fire, with absorbing punishment and returning it, with frontal assaults and unflinching advance. The Hellcat doctrine inverted this. Courage meant shooting from ambush, retreating before superior force could respond, refusing battle on the enemy's terms. It was Native American warfare transplanted to mechanized combat, and it offended officers raised on notions of fair play and honorable engagement. The Hellcat's tactical employment in combat revealed insights about armored warfare that resonated far beyond World War II, insights that would influence American military doctrine through Korea, Vietnam, and into the modern era. The vehicle proved that in mobile warfare, positioning mattered more than protection, that firing first from an unexpected angle beat trading blows with a better armored opponent, that psychological dominance could be achieved through unpredictability rather than overwhelming force. Hellcat crews developed tactics that read like hunting strategies rather than military doctrine. They learned to use terrain that heavier tanks couldn't navigate: soft ground, narrow forest paths, steep hills that would bog down a Panther. They mastered the art of the ambush, hiding in positions that German tankers never considered threatened, waiting until enemy armor exposed its flanks or rear, then striking before the target could rotate its turret. The M18's incredible traverse speed meant that crews could engage targets across a wider arc, faster than any German tank could respond, turning the vehicle's 360-degree field of fire into a decisive advantage. In the hedgerows of Normandy, Hellcats proved devastatingly effective. The Bocage country, with its ancient earthen walls topped with thick hedges, created a maze of narrow lanes and small fields that favored ambush over maneuver. German defenders positioned Panthers and Tigers to cover the obvious approaches, creating killing zones where Allied armor bunched up and died. Hellcats ignored these approaches. They infiltrated through positions heavier tanks couldn't reach, used their speed to reposition after every shot, and disappeared into terrain before German gunners could return fire. Veterans reported engagements lasting seconds. Spot the target, fire, reverse at full speed into cover, relocate and prepare for the next shot. The statistics tell part of the story. The M18 achieved the best kill-to-loss ratio of any American armored vehicle in the European theater. More than 3 German tanks destroyed for every Hellcat lost, but numbers miss the psychological impact. German tankers who survived encounters with Hellcats reported a profound sense of vulnerability, the terrifying knowledge that death could come from any direction at any moment, that their armor meant nothing against an enemy they couldn't catch or pin down. Prisoners of war spoke of American ghost tanks that appeared, killed and vanished before anyone could respond. This psychological warfare, the creation of an enemy that seemed to violate the rules of conventional combat, represented a force multiplier that no amount of armor plate could match. The Hellcat's success came at a cost that military historians still debate, a cost measured not in strategic outcomes, but in human lives and moral choices. The doctrine that created the M18 demanded that young men accept risks that soldiers in other vehicles didn't face, that they forfeit protection in exchange for the promise of victory through superior tactics. This raised uncomfortable questions. Did commanders have the right to ask soldiers to fight in vehicles they knew couldn't withstand hits? Was the tactical effectiveness worth the psychological burden on crews who lived every mission knowing one mistake meant death? Critics of the tank destroyer doctrine, and by extension the Hellcat, argued that it represented a false economy, that the resources spent developing and deploying these specialized vehicles should have gone toward building more and better tanks. They pointed to the fact that as the war progressed and American armor improved, Shermans equipped with the same 76mm gun could perform the Hellcat's mission while offering better crew protection. They noted that the organizational separation between tanks and tank destroyers created coordination problems and doctrinal confusion that persisted throughout the war. They questioned whether speed and mobility really compensated for vulnerability, or whether Hellcat crews simply got lucky more often than they got hit. These criticisms gained weight from tragic losses. When Hellcats did get caught, pinned by superior numbers, trapped by terrain, or simply victim to the random chance that defines combat, the results were horrific. The thin armor that made the vehicle fast provided no protection when German guns found their mark. The open turret that enhanced awareness also meant that penetrating hits or near misses from artillery could kill or wound the entire crew. The high-power engine that pushed the M18 to extraordinary speeds also meant that fuel fires burned fast and hot, giving crews seconds to escape. Veterans who survived the war carried scars, physical and psychological, from these moments when their speed failed to save them. Yet defenders of the Hellcat point to a deeper truth about armored warfare that the critics missed. Protection is always relative, and in World War II, no Allied tank could reliably withstand hits from German heavy armor at combat ranges. A Sherman's thicker armor might give crews a psychological sense of security, but German 88mm guns punched through it almost as easily as they penetrated Hellcat armor. Given this reality, the M18's doctrine made brutal sense. If you're going to die anyway when hit, better to be fast enough to avoid being hit in the first place. Better to kill the enemy before he can shoot, rather than hope your armor saves you after he does. The Hellcat also forced a reckoning with American cultural myths about warfare and masculinity. The vehicle succeeded precisely because it rejected the frontal assault, the stand-up fight, the fair contest of armor versus armor. It embraced what many considered dishonorable tactics: ambush, hit and run, refusal of direct engagement, and proved these tactics more effective than traditional military honor allowed. This challenged deeply held beliefs about courage and cowardice, about fighting fair and winning dirty, about the kind of warfare that free men should practice. Compare the Hellcat to its German counterparts, the Jagdpanzer IV or the Hetzer, and you see different philosophies of national character expressed in steel. German tank destroyers prioritized protection and firepower, accepting limited mobility in exchange for survivability. They reflected a military culture built on discipline, order, and holding ground regardless of cost. The Hellcat reflected American pragmatism, a willingness to break rules if breaking rules worked, a cultural comfort with asymmetric warfare that European militaries found unsettling. In the final months of the war, as Allied armies pushed into Germany itself, Hellcat crews found themselves hunting not just tanks, but the last desperate remnants of a dying regime. They pursued retreating columns, ambushed supply convoys, and engaged in the brutal urban combat where their speed became a liability in narrow streets designed centuries before anyone imagined armored warfare. Some crews died in these final battles, killed not by German armor, but by Panzerfaust teams in rubble, by artillery in prepared positions, by the simple mathematics of war where even the fastest vehicle eventually runs out of room to maneuver. But for those who survived, the Hellcat represented something more than just an effective weapon. It represented a validation of American pragmatism over European tradition, of innovation over convention, of results over reputation. The crews who climbed out of these vehicles when the shooting stopped had proven that you didn't need the thickest armor or the biggest gun to win. You needed to think differently, fight smarter, and refuse to accept the enemy's definition of what combat should look like. The German tankers who survived encounters with Hellcats never forgot them. In post-war interviews, former Panther and Tiger commanders spoke with grudging respect about the American tank destroyers that hunted them through France and Germany. They described the helpless rage of knowing an enemy was out there, too fast to catch, too aggressive to predict, capable of appearing anywhere at any moment. They talked about the psychological toll of being prey rather than predator, of losing the armored superiority that had defined their experience earlier in the war. Many admitted that they feared Hellcats more than the heavier Allied tanks, precisely because the M18 refused to fight on terms where German armor held an advantage. The Hellcat's legacy extended far beyond World War II. Its doctrine, mobility over protection, firepower over armor, initiative over defense, influenced the development of post-war tank destroyers and influenced American thinking about light armor through the Cold War. The philosophy that created the M18 can be seen in modern vehicles like the Striker, in doctrines emphasizing rapid deployment and network-centric warfare, in the persistent American belief that speed and technology can substitute for mass and protection. But perhaps the Hellcat's greatest legacy lives in the stories that veterans told and their families still tell, stories of young men who climbed into vehicles they knew couldn't protect them and hunted the most dangerous predators on the battlefield. These weren't stories of invincible heroes or guaranteed victory. They were stories of ordinary Americans who accepted extraordinary risks because someone had to, who turned vulnerability into a weapon, who proved that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to fight despite it. The day German crews laughed at the Hellcat tank was the last day any of them made that mistake. Those who survived their first encounter spread the word. The American tank destroyer with the open turret and thin armor wasn't a joke or a desperate improvisation. It was death on tracks, faster than anything they'd faced, aggressive beyond reason and more lethal than vehicles twice its weight. It was proof that in war, as in life, success doesn't always come from being the strongest or best protected. Sometimes it comes from being the fastest, the smartest, and the most willing to embrace risk that others won't accept. The Hellcat didn't win the war alone. No single weapon ever does. But it won something perhaps more important. It proved that American ingenuity and courage could overcome material disadvantages, that thinking differently about problems could yield solutions that brute force couldn't match, that speed, properly employed, really could serve as armor. And it gave thousands of young men who crewed these vehicles a fighting chance to come home, not because they were protected, but because they were fast enough and smart enough to survive in a vehicle that made no promises and offered no guarantees beyond this. If you fought hard enough and moved fast enough, you might just live to see tomorrow. That's the real story of the Hellcat. Not a tale of invincible technology or guaranteed victory, but a harder truth about what warfare demands and what courage means when protection is a luxury you can't afford and speed is the only advantage you have. The German crews who laughed stopped laughing fast. The American crews who fought in these vehicles earned their place in history the hard way, one ambush, one kill, one desperate retreat at a time, racing death across the battlefields of Europe and somehow, impossibly, winning more often than they lost.